Oh my.
We are lucky I remembered to hit go live.
Yes. Can I say one thing before we get started?
Yeah.
When I do these shows back to back, I'm reminded of a book that I bought many, 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 many years ago. It was written by Tony Kornheiser. It's called Back for More Cash. And all he did was take the columns that he'd written for the Washington Post when he worked for them, and he put them in a book. And then sold the book. It was stuff he'd already written. And so, like, when I do the show with Zach and then 15 minutes later I do the show with you, I feel like, well, I'm back for more cash. But then I realized quickly there is no cash. So
I thought for sure, and I'm sure everyone in the comments here can back me up on this, that was going to be a story about you having to pee too much and not being able to make it on time.
It could have been, but
I thought that's where we were going to go with that.
Sorry to disappoint.
No, not at all. No.
Oh, Lord.
Well, welcome, everybody. We are talking, what are we talking about today? To battery technology. I am off my game today, folks. So please bear with me. I am off my game today.
Can I say the only thing I know about batteries are the ones that I put in my hearing aids. So if I am not the authority on batteries, if I don't ask the right questions, it's not because I'm not hearing you, because my hearing aids are working fine. It's because the only damn batteries I know about, and now I just use rechargeable hearing aids, so I don't even bother with batteries.
But well, wait a minute. There's still batteries in them.
Yeah, but I don't.
Because you can recharge them. Okay.
Yeah, but I don't have to replace them.
And what kind of technology or what kind of battery chemistry are those hearing aid batteries?
I'm going to guess and go lithium ion.
That would be my guess too, but
yeah,
I have actually no idea.
Yeah, I that it would be wonderful if they just automatically increased the volume when I needed it, but it doesn't do that. It does not have full self volume mode.
Hey, AI and hearing aids is coming. You know it is. You know it's coming.
Well, yeah. Hopefully, I'm around when it happens.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So, talk to me about batteries. Talk to me about. I mean, I know. I don't, as you know, I don't know much about electric vehicles, although I have learned a lot in the last 6 weeks that we've been doing this. But the only thing I do know for sure is that, well, electric vehicles don't work if they don't have these big ass batteries, that allow them to store enough energy to propel the electric motor to make the car go. So, if I'm not mistaken, as what I would call, it just had them regular batteries at first.
It's the lead acid.
Yes.
So yeah, which were way too heavy.
Yes, and probably had very limited range, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think the Toyota RAV4 EV, if anyone remembers those, most people forget that Toyota had an EV before most other people. Yeah. And the Honda EV Plus and the GM EV1, I think they got an average of like 100-mile range.
Wow.
So, I mean, still, like if the average person's only doing, 40 miles in a day, okay, you could still get around on it. You just weren't leaving town.
Gotcha.
On it.
Unless it was a small town.
Yeah, and there weren't a lot of large superchargers out there back then, and there were all kinds of problems with those. But they did lead to the nickel metal hydride.
Okay.
In the 90s, which is really when we saw the first sort of what we would consider EVs come out.
Now, let me ask you a silly question. And as if the audience hasn't figured it out yet, you and I have no real discussion prior to the show as to what direction it's going to go. So the questions just pop into my head and I spit them out. would it be safe to say that the move towards electric vehicles has been sped up because of the um, of personal electronic devices, primarily smartphones and things
Yep.
of that nature, that forced those manufacturers to come up with ways to power these little things so that 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 knowledge was then used to make the big ass batteries that go into electric vehicles. Is would that be safe to say, fair to say?
Yeah, I think the technology, it did seem to work sort of opposite of the way that works most of the time, which is you start really big
Yeah.
and then you figure out how to make it small.
Yes.
In this case, it seemed that, I mean, that was still the case with mobile phones and such. Uh, you remember the big 1980s brick phones,
Uh-huh. I
and
do.
then the
I had
batteries
one.
got smaller and smaller and
Yes.
smaller,
Yes.
um, and now they're getting bigger again.
Yeah.
But that technology led way to more of these studies. I think these studies probably led way to Apple and other people figuring out those kind of batteries. Um, but we're still in, despite the fact this has been going on since the 18th century or 19th century, not
Yeah.
18th century.
Yeah.
Um,
Please.
as I said, I'm not on my game today. Give me a moment, folks. But since this has been going on since the 19th century, we're still in the infancy of this new battery technology. What we have today in 10 years just won't look anything like this. Um, the advances in the last 10 year have been astronomical. The batteries have gotten so much better, so much more efficient. Uh, Lots of companies are working on this. We tend to focus on Tesla because they're actually working on batteries and vehicles at the same time,
Mhm.
whereas most manufacturers are sort of sourcing out the battery part of it. Hey, let's get somebody else who's just working on batteries to do this for us. We'll make the car, we'll bring in their battery. Tesla's actually trying to do both.
What is it they say about technology? Is it that it's changing so rapidly these days that what is it, like every 15, 18 months it's completely different? Is that what is something like that that I've read somewhere?
Moore's law. Yeah. Moore's law says that technology doubles every 2 years or five. I think it was started 5 years, but that
Yeah.
has changed to like 2 or 3 years now. So it's just ramping up exponentially.
So
Uh,
so do we expect that same thing to happen with batteries?
yeah. I mean, I definitely, the last 10 years, batteries have gone through an enormous change. Even if you look at the original Tesla Roadster
Uh-huh.
versus the 4680 cells in the Model 3 and Y, that there's a world of difference. Those technologies are barely even the same anymore. Just in that 20-year span right there. And they're getting faster and faster and better. Uh, there's all kinds of new approaches. Toyota focusing on solid state batteries, lithium sulfur batteries are being investigated right now. They're really good. Some of the technologies, I think they're going to end up splitting. We're talking about batteries and EVs right now,
Yeah.
but stationary batteries will probably end up having a different technology as well.
Will 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 there be a time when the batteries that the big ass batteries that we use today um, are not necessarily anywhere near as large as they are today, and at a certain point in the future it would just be when instead of charging you just go into the station and you pull out your existing battery pack and you replace it with a fully charged battery pack, and yours that needs to be charged just goes in and gets charged to the next person that comes along, they would that just might be the one they pull out when it's their turn.
So there are several companies working on battery swapping technology. So
Okay.
far, it hasn't worked out, and that would require a standardization of batteries.
Gotcha.
So that's going to be the big thing. Otherwise, you'd have to find, a Tesla station or a Hyundai station or a VW station to be able to swap out those batteries. So, and also right now, as it stands, different modes, different models and trims, you can get bigger or smaller battery packs. So all that has to sort of be figured into that. I don't know that battery swapping is going to be the way we go with things. I think what it's going to be is you're going to use less batteries overall. Yeah, they'll be smaller with less capacity, but they'll charge faster. I think that's more the future that we'll see. So we won't be talking about 800-mile range.
Yeah.
We'll be staying in the 300-mile range, but it'll charge in 5 minutes.
Gotcha.
I think that's more likely the route we take. Solid state, of course, can change a lot of that.
So on an existing Tesla, if it were to need a new battery pack, and everybody says, the batteries are expensive, 15 to 20 grand. How long does it actually take, or what do they have to do to replace it? I mean, isn't the battery pack in a Tesla basically the floor of the car?
It is. It currently takes quite a bit of effort to change that out. It's not like you have to take the whole car apart, but there's definitely a lot of work involved in there. So that's part of the thing with battery swap is you have to redesign the way the vehicle sort of operates for the most part. Again, there are companies who are experimenting with that, and they do have a way to quickly drop them out and swap them. I just don't see that as the way we go with it overall. And yeah, the Tesla is a skateboard design.
Uh-huh.
So part of its stability and the reason why you can't roll a Model S is because it's distributed evenly all along the center of that floor.
Gotcha.
And they're very heavy, as you have mentioned.
Yes.
So it creates a huge stability for the vehicle and helps all of these EVs really get these super high crash test ratings because they're really hard to, you can't roll a Model S in the safety tests. I'm sure you can if you drive it off a cliff, which we have seen somebody do.
Yes, and the people survived.
Yeah, and they all survived, and he's in jail for it because he tried to do it in a Tesla. So, but yeah, I think we have one here. VinFast is designing for a battery swap too. VinFast is fascinating just in the way they're doing their entire company right now, where you rent the battery separately from your vehicle.
But help me with this. You wouldn't have a vehicle without the battery, would you?
No, you have to pay for the battery. You have to, but it's a recurring. Let's call it a subscription. But it's a lease where the battery is different. Now, a lot of people hate this concept because I've got to make my car payment. Then I have another $200 or $300 on top of that for the battery. It definitely gets expensive. However,
yes,
I'm going to say the upside of that is as battery technology improves and things get lighter, cheaper, and better with VinFast, you just drive in there and swap out your battery for a new and improved battery. So you can keep your vehicle for 10 years, but you won't have 10-year-old battery technology in your VinFast minivan because you are able to swap out that battery as the technology changes and improves.
Now, here's a question for you. This is just the way my mind works, so I apologize up front. One of the major reasons people are going to electric is they're more environmentally friendly, allegedly. Okay. There's less emissions, so they become more environmentally friendly. The downside of it is the mining and everything else that has to go on in order to be able to produce the batteries, and in order to perhaps so the question that I have in my mind is right now, um, Tesla in the States represents what, 6% of all vehicles sold, something like that?
Yeah.
5%, something, 5-6%.
18% here in California.
Yeah, well, that's California. Where you have the infrastructure, where the rest of the country might not. But forgetting that for a moment, here's the question that I want to ask. There are, I believe, about 200 million vehicles in America today. Primarily ICE vehicles, and the idea is to eventually do away with ICE vehicles.
Eventually.
Yes, let's assume for a second that we would eventually need 200 million electric vehicles so that we can replace those 200 million ICE vehicles. What's the environmental damage being done to mine all the stuff that's needed for the batteries to be able to have 200 million electric vehicles? And wouldn't that be worse than continuing to burn fossil fuels? I'm just asking. I don't know the answer to that question, but it just seems to me that at some point in time, if we're going to do away with internal combustion engines and everything's got to be electric or something, I mean, what the hell are we doing to the earth to produce enough batteries for 200 million vehicles?
And Ray, this is why we have you on the show, because I love it when you set me up.
Yes.
And you don't even know it.
Good.
Because I do have an answer for this. Okay. Tesla had an answer for this.
Yes.
I'm not an engineer. So they are. They have a lot of, so they're on the Tesla Battery Day. They explained this, and I've done some research into it. Again, I'm not an engineer, so I only understand as much as I understand. However, with recycling now, they do sort of an inefficient chemical breakdown recycling of batteries.
Yes,
right?
It's one way.
And they remove components and they try to recycle some. Tesla's at 95% recycled now. However, they want to get to direct recycling, which they're saying they can recycle 99% of the batteries. So what we think of when we think of replacing all these vehicles is very linear. Okay, so if it takes X amount of lithium now, and for one car, then times that by 200 million, and oh my God, we would never have that enough lithium for that. But of course, cars go through cycles. We have chop shops and junkyards full of cars all the time. So it's not just those. There's a lot less out on the road than there are vehicles that are out there.
Yes.
As mining continues, as more and more batteries get produced, and we get better at recycling those batteries. Again, we're already at 95% at Tesla. Some are less, but it's going to get more as we also start using other technologies like the lithium sulfur. So we're not using cobalt, and we're not using manganese and all of these. There'll be less impact there. We'll be able to use less lithium in a solid state. They'll be smaller, lighter. But as recycling grows, as more batteries get out there, we'll have more components to recycle into new vehicles, and the mining will actually go down in its need over time.
Okay, so let's just say for argument's sake that of those 200 million electric vehicles that we're going to need eventually to replace the 200 million ICE vehicles, let's be really, really generous and say that half of those 200 million batteries are going to come from recycling. That still means that there'd be 100 million fresh batteries that are going to be needed.
Which is why we're working on changing this technology, right?
Which is
because it's not sustainable.
But here's the hole in your argument right there, which is why we're looking to change the battery chemistries so that what the battery chemistry is today that you're going to recycle today might not be worth anything moving forward when you've come up with a completely different battery chemistry 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So that to say that you're going to recycle a big portion of it just might not be the case, because that chemistry that's used today could be a chemistry that we would laugh at 10 years from now, and everybody's going, well, why recycle that stuff? We don't even want it anymore. So I guess my question or my point is, we don't even know what we don't even know. And we're assuming that we'll be able to provide enough of these energy cells to be able to have the world drive around in electric vehicles. And at a certain point, I think you have to be doing more damage to the environment and to the earth than if we just figured out different ways of making fossil fuel vehicles more efficient.
Well, okay. So start with fossil fuel is a limited resource that is already getting harder and harder to extract all the time. So for me, that argument's somewhat of a non-starter. It's going to run out eventually. So at some point, we're going to have to make a change because it's a finite resource. So even if we were able to make it super clean, it's still going to run out. We're not going to be able to sustain that. So we have to find alternatives. So that's part of it. Part of it, too, is you're right. You and I don't know what we don't know, but there are much smarter people than you and I out there working on this. And they know what they don't know, and they know a lot more than at least I do. And I'm going to assume that you're going to say they know more than you do about battery technologies.
That's a correct assumption. I would say that, yes.
So they know way more than both of us. Like I read some of these papers. One of our members sent me a paper today too, from Science Direct about this. I will say I understand about 90% of it, and then 10% of it I'm like, okay, I don't understand. I need to, I got to send it over to Justin and say, hey, Justin, explain this to me, because Justin actually has a degree in climate science.
Yeah.
He has a science background. He loves all this stuff, so he can sort of break it down to me in a way that my little brain can understand. So I do know that there are things. Certainly, we have had a few comments here in chat that some of these batteries too, they're inefficient after a while. After they degrade, say 15%, you can't have them in your vehicle anymore. You've lost too much range, everything else. But then there are several companies out there, including Tesla now, who are taking those batteries and putting them in stationary power walls. They're perfectly fine there. They can charge slower. You don't need that much. So that's part of the recycling, is putting them into stationary power walls so you can store energy. Because obviously the big obstacle in green energy, wind, solar, tidal, is you're at the mercy of when it can be produced. You can't produce it on demand, so you have to store it.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you said that makes sense to me is that fossil fuels are a finite resource. Eventually, you run out of them. Um, couldn't the same be said for the minerals and stuff that we have to mine in order to produce the batteries? Isn't there at a certain point in time a finite amount of that? Um,
Correct, but we're reusing those minerals through battery recycling and other things. So, and they're not lithium's not degrading in that process. It's not
okay,
the lithium that's disappearing. So we can get all the lithium back out of it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, but certainly that's where other things in the battery technologies need to come in. That's where the sulfur and sodium batteries come in. Sodium, one of the most abundant minerals on the planet,
well,
far more than fossil fuels.
here's a question I have for you, and this is just, I don't know why I think of it, but what has anybody thought of a way to use like salt water as a power source for vehicles?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean that's would be sodium. I mean, they're working on. It's not going to fill your tank with seawater. No, it's not going to like that.
yeah, but
I
is
mean,
there a way? Is there a way to? Well, I guess what you would say is there's a way to extract the sodium out of the seawater and use that as a source for the batteries. My question is there a way to utilize the water itself? Um, and maybe you do fill a tank with seawater or salt water, and you have an electric battery that heats it, that produces the steam or whatever that allows it to propel the vehicle. Or am I just like in fantasy land there?
I think you might be off into sci-fi right now. However,
Yeah,
all of this was sci-fi 40, 50 years ago.
yeah,
So right now, I think saltwater is just too corrosive in that way to get in there and use
yeah,
in the manner that you're speaking by our current definitions and standards. Nobody's saying that your vision can't come true someday. If it's out there, flip phones were taken from Star Trek, lest we forget.
yeah. But think of it. If there's a way to utilize seawater, salt water, okay,
Go, yeah.
And and one of the major issues we have is that the oceans are rising. We are losing land mass on our coasts because the sea levels are rising. So if we could somehow utilize seawater to figure out how to propel vehicles, we could be reducing the amount of the rising seawater and reclaiming our land mass. And there in California, you could have even more of the most expensive beachfront homes ever to have been built. Think of that as a possibility.
I often debate whether we should have a environmental impact show or not on these subjects. But yeah, I mean, certainly tidal power uses the ocean and the
Okay.
tides. And California is experimenting with that. We haven't gone as fast as we had predicted. What a big surprise.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who does. I used to say government never does, but then Elon Musk came out and you go, okay, well, maybe nobody can hit a timeline. I don't know. Because he's not much more accurate on his times than the government is on theirs. I'm still waiting on my Cybertruck.
You'll be waiting.
Yeah. But, I think tidal power, as far as ocean goes, is the solution there. So consider hydroelectric power, where we normally dump it off of something to hit the generator. Well, now we're just using the power of the tide coming in and out and waves to do the same thing and generate power. So it's not using salt water, but the problem with the saltwater thing, like we do desalinization now, is you can't ever get it all out, and
Yes.
then the brine gets dumped back in and creates an ecological disaster there,
Okay,
uh,
perfect.
where you really damage the sea life because you're just putting super concentrated um, salt sludge back in, and you just kind of kill everything around it. So that's the problem with desalinization
It's called
as it stands
unintended.
right now.
It's called unintended consequences.
I mean, isn't that everything? Like, right?
Yeah.
When cars first were invented, there was an electric car right next to the fossil fuel car. Uh, we chose fossil fuels because it was better, it was cheaper, it was easier to get, and we thought better for the environment
Yeah.
because it wasn't going to be extracting all this stuff. Now here we are, 150 years later, and we go, oh, okay, well, you know, everything has unintended consequences. It's just
So
whether we
so
can learn from that and adapt for the future.
so are you saying that the beta might make it back?
I hope so. I hope so. I had a Betamax growing up.
Me too.
So yeah, it was a far superior technology.
Yes,
Uh,
but it didn't catch on quite like VHS.
well, one industry created the VHS.
Yes.
Boom. We all know what that industry was, and that chose that format because it was cheaper. But that aspect of it is actually interesting because that's not different than what we do now, right? And I've said this for a long time. I think the obstacle to getting rid of lithium batteries is all the investment in lithium mines going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to put in, $500 billion and then in 5 years go, well, there's a better technology, so we're just going to write that down. We're going to write that off as a loss and continue on to something else. So this technology is bound by, like everything else, the almighty dollar. And the more we invest in some of this technology, I think it slows Moore's law down to a degree.
Yeah.
And Elon has complained about this and on Twitter and gotten kicked out of from being the president of Tesla for it and everything else when he said he wanted to buy back stock because going public created such a problem is that it slowed Tesla's technology advancement down because the stockholders wanted return on their investment. They wanted the money. And Elon and some of his engineers wanted to just go full swing and say, nope, let's just scrap all that and move over to here and do this. And of course, investors don't like that. They want their money. No, we put in all this money. We want some return on it. Crazy thinking.
Yeah, go figure.
So that's certainly an obstacle, I think, in the future of all of this is do the people who aren't investing in lithium change the technology, or is it going to be guarded like fossil fuels are now, or were in the past? I think even a lot of these large historically fossil fuel companies, Shell, BP, others especially, they're really moving into the sustainable green energy game because they kind of see the end of the road too.
Yeah.
So, but it took a long time to get there. There was a documentary quite a few years ago now, called Who Killed the EV? Who Killed the Electric Vehicle, actually, I believe it's called, talking about, how that industry sort of suppressed technology and killed off competition and et cetera, sort of a silly documentary now, but the information is still true. So, if we go into lithium, that's my biggest concern is, okay, so we find some holy grail of technology next. Is everyone who's investing, there's trillions of dollars being invested by entire countries into lithium mining. So if that becomes the outdated technology, how long do we have to deal with it until it, they are willing to give up that power?
I don't know, but I'm still betting money on saltwater powered vehicles.
What about just air power? Couldn't they just use little fans to suck in air from the front of the vehicle and push them out through smaller jets in the back, propelling the vehicle forward?
I don't know. Perhaps
No,
they
you
can't.
can't. That's called perpetual motion, and
Okay.
that
Well,
doesn't exist.
I just I realize that companies have committed trillions of dollars to making EVs the vehicles of the future, and I for one am not 100% convinced that those are necessarily the vehicles of the future, when you consider the environmental impacts that it has through mining and everything else. And so I think that's today's shiny object, and I have no idea what tomorrow's shiny object is, but I think it'll be a saltwater powered vehicle. They'll have these special gas tanks, they're water tanks, and you'll have these little lithium ion batteries or solid state batteries that heat that up and create steam that will propel the car. And
So
steam
you
can,
want a steam powered car?
and there used to be many years, there were steam powered cars. It's just like there were steam powered trains. Um, So I don't know. Why not? Why
Uh,
not?
well,
Um,
I feel like you would be a big proponent of hydrogen fuel cells, Ray,
perhaps.
because
Perhaps.
their byproduct is water.
Yes. What's wrong with that?
Unfortunately, you have to get the hydrogen and put it together and get the
No,
infrastructure in place.
I
But
get that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. But it's just a thought. Just a thought.
yeah. I mean, we'll see. I will say that perpetual motion is against the laws of physics. So, MJ, sorry, it's never going to happen. Physics will not change.
Okay.
But steam powered car. I think, I think Jay Leno actually has a steam powered car.
Yeah.
Obviously, a
Okay.
really old one. So
Yeah.
we'll see. I mean, I doubt that we're going to go to steam at this point, but
Yeah.
I could have said 30 years ago we weren't going to go to battery cars either. So what do I know?
There's something about history, and everything old again is new again. Okay. I don't remember the Zoot suit, but I remember seeing pictures of Zoot suits. Fashion always comes back, and you are an extremely fashionable guy. So that
I was just saying I'd wear a Zoot suit. I love
of
those.
course
They're
you
great.
would.
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'll
So,
wear anything. So
well, my point is that is what's old is new, and what's new becomes old. So I don't know, something along the lines of a steam engine or something that could help propel a vehicle. You never know. You just never know.
what about the Lightyear Zero, a solar powered car?
Well, when they can produce solar power panels that are small enough to fit on a car, that produce enough
No,
energy to let and what you do in hurricanes and snowstorms and blizzards are beyond me, but
that's not. So the Lightyear Zero exists. It's a solar powered car, and
yeah.
they're doing it down in Australia, a few other places. But I have the same thing. Like even in California, it's been 4 days like this. You can't see. I don't know why
Yeah.
I'm pointing, but if you could see, it's raining.
Okay.
Of course, and it's been raining for 4 days, so I'm not sure a solar powered car. I don't know what I do, in the rain. But
Maybe it would have to be a hybrid.
is it a solar
Solar
electric
and gas.
hybrid?
Solar and gas hybrid.
Oh, gas.
Yes.
Okay, you want a solar gas hybrid?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
So,
and
we're gonna
use
take
less
the clean
gas
and the super dirty, and we're just gonna shove them together.
together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And you won't have to do all that lithium mining per se. So
Yeah. But then you get into the solar panels, as you said, and
Okay.
those are not exactly green to produce
Okay.
either.
Okay. Do you know
However,
what time it is?
it's time for you to go get a bab.
I need my big ass bowl of oatmeal.
Yeah,
a bab of oatmeal,
that's
ladies and
right.
gentlemen. A big ass bowl. That's a bab. Yes, it's lunchtime.
It is lunchtime. I always lose track of our time. I got to get
Yes,
better at that.
yes.
So, all right.
or,
Thank you for being here, everybody.
or I have to
Tomorrow.
eat before the show. One of the two.
Yeah. Well, it's hard when you have shows all day long and you're recording before that.
Yes.
I get that.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Tomorrow, very special show with our very favorite Justin on his experience owning his Ioniq 5 for 1 year now.
Wow.
So he's going to break down some of the numbers and talk all about his experience with the Ioniq 5 and why he would still to this day choose his Ioniq 5 over a Model Y.
Oh, I can't wait.
So yeah, it's going to be a good show.
I'll be here for that. I know he'd have a tough time charging that at a Tesla supercharger from what I've seen, but don't let that stop him.
That's right. He would piss everybody at his Tesla supercharger off, yes. Parking backwards, crossing lanes. Yeah, that would be awful. So thank you for being here, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Thanks, Justice.